עכשיו, למה אני מספרת לכם את כל זה? כי תוך השנים הייתי מאוד מאוד עסוקה גם בכתיבת גרנטים וגם בביקורת של גרנטים. הייתי הרבה, ואני אספר לכם כשאנחנו נגיע לזה, כשאני אתחיל לדבר אנגלית. ב-NIH, ב-CDRMP, ב-Common Foundation, ב-American Cancer Society, וגם הייתי ביקורת של גרנטים של אוסטרליה, של קנדה, של גריס וכולי. כלומר, המון ניסיון יש לי. אני מקווה שמהניסיון שלי אני אוכל קצת לעזור לכם איך ומה לפענח את כל המוזרות הזאת של NIH בעיקר. רוב הדיבור שלי פה יהיה היום על NIH. אם אתם מבינים את המערכת, אפשר לעבוד בתוך המערכת. זה העניין שלי. ומי שכאן לא היה אף פעם, אפילו שרק קורא בעיתונות וכולי, לא יכול לדעת את כל הדברים האינטריקט שבתוך זה. מה זה אינסטיטוט, מה זה סנטרס, מה זה הגרנטים, מה זה הסטאדי סקשן, איך זה עובד, מי עושה החלטות, איך אפשר לעבוד בתוך המערכת, מתי אתה יכול לעשות אינטרווין ולעשות את זה שזה יהיה לטובתך. את הגרנט אני לא יכולה לכתוב לכם, אני יכולה לעזור לכם כל הדברים האחרים בשביל להבין את המערכת. So far so good, let's go. Now I'm moving to English. So that's me. I became Professor Emeritus last year after so many years. זה הבניין שלנו בסינסינטי, הוא נבנה על ידי, I'll talk English now. It was built by a very famous architect, Frank Gehry. I don't know if you heard of him. And this is my motto, and I think you should take this motto to your consideration. I think the pessimist see difficulty in every opportunity, and the optimist see opportunity in every difficulty. And if you take that, then you can succeed in science. So let's start with NIH. The NIH is the National Institute of Health. It's a mammoth organization. It's huge. It's very difficult to understand it, so I'll try to make it easier for you. So it is made of 27 different institutes of centers. Each component has its own specific agenda. Usually it's focused on a particular disease or particular system, okay, body system. In a minute I'll give you some listing what institute I mean. All but 3 of the components receive direct funding from Congress. So every year there is negotiation how much money goes to NIH, to the different institutes. And that's indeed is the problem nowadays. Now $1 billion, it's invested about $27 billion annually. You'll see later on it's about a third or a fourth of the total budgets of the state of Israel. It's a huge amount of money. And mind you that this is not the only agency in the United States that fund research, because you have the NSF and you have many other. But NIH alone, as of 2018, $27 billion. Most of the budget of NIH goes to about 50,000 per year, 50,000 grants. They're funding more than 300,000 researchers in 2,500 universities, medical schools, and research institutions in every state and around the world. In other words, they do fund, not a lot, they do fund non-Americans. There is a NIH campus. Quite a few Israelis go to NIH to do research in there, postdocs, and so on. About 10% of the NIH budget support a project that they have about 6,000 scientists. It is in Bethesda, Maryland. Okay? So this, I'm giving you several listing of several of the institutes, because if you apply to NIH, it's very important to know which institute it goes to, and you can intervene and direct your grant to a specific institute if you know how to do that. So this is the 3 big ones, and the listing here is in billions of dollars at the year 2016, 2017, and 2018. And they listed by the time they were established. So the first institute in NIH in 1963 was actually the National Cancer Institute, NCI. You'd like to know the abbreviations because this is in almost all correspondence. These abbreviations are used all the time. NIDDK, NINDS, NIAID, and so on. Okay? You can see $5 billion alone to NCI, to NIAID, NIDDK funded a lot of my research. They funded a lot of my research. Child Health and Human Development. This is National Eye Institute for a single organ. They get $770 million. But what I want to point out is the drop in funding, which is really a major problem for the American science, is the drop in funding in all institutes from 2016 to 2018. There is another listing here. National Institute of Environmental Health, it listed twice because it gets the funding from two different components. National Institute of Mental Health. So your research, if you work on the brain, you probably work for the NIMH. If you work on cancer, you probably go for that. If you work on more basic science, you go to NGMS and so on. If you work on environmental issues, you go to NIHS. But these are the institutes. We'll talk in a little bit about the study section, which is entirely different component. Okay? There is another listing. I didn't write all of them. For example, the National Institute for Drug Abuse, depending upon what you're studying, and you can see on and on. I would imagine people that do a lot of imaging, biomedical instrumentation, and so on, probably will go to this, NIBB. The National Library of Medicine, most of the literature searches that you do are funded by the National Library of Medicine. Office of Director gets quite a bit of money because they go for special projects. For example, there was the Zika problem in South America. And so they started a new project and they wanted more grants to go for that. There are some new ones. I listed the Fogarty International Center. Fogarty was meant to fund cross between Americans going to Europe, European going to America, and you can see, thanks to Trump, they dropped it completely. In 2018, they dropped all the money for Fogarty, which is really shame. So the total budget of NIH has dropped from 2016, didn't change as much at 2017, but dropped about 20% at 2018. And I listed here the total budget of the State of Israel, 116 billion. So it's about, NIH alone is about a third of the total budget of the State of Israel. Any questions here? Okay. So now we'll get to really more what we want to discuss here. So you write a proposal. What happened to it from the time you submit it to the time, if you're very lucky, you get it or you don't get it and you want to know why you didn't get it? First of all, the most regular grants have very specific deadlines, and you have to adhere by the deadlines, no if and buts and maybe. If you're a member of a study section, they allow you to be late or to be later, but unless there is a hurricane or anything like that, a deadline is a deadline, and you have to adhere by that. So you submit the grant, and probably that's the officials from your institute that do that, and they submit it, and it goes to the Center for Scientific Review, SCR. What do? They're basically looking at several things. They look at your specific aims and the abstract, and they decide by specific keywords. They don't read the whole grant. They read only one or two pieces of the grant. They decide which institute it belongs to, unless you are applying specifically to a request for application where they tell you we are looking for studies on breast cancer and the drug abuse or something like that. But if it is what you call investigator-initiated award, they will assign you to an institute. And they will assign you both to an institute, a specific division within the institute, and then they'll assign you to a study section. A study section that does not belong to a specific institute, it belongs to overall NIH. And I'll explain that a little bit more. You can intervene here because they allow you nowadays to write a letter and say, I'm requesting because I think I look at the composition of a study section that my grant will go to this study section and don't go to this study section. And they usually will agree with you or they go along with you, unless they have particular reason not to. So you can intervene. Once the grant goes to, usually there is a time of about 3 months between the time it's processed in the SCR, the division, the Center for Scientific Review, to the time it goes to the study section. Meanwhile, they do horse trading. If they say it doesn't belong to my division, they go to another division and so on. But once they decide that your grants go to another division, you are assigned a program director, and the program director follow you. This grant follow you throughout the whole process. If you need to contact someone, you contact the program director. And they will send you letters and will tell you who they are and what they can do for you, okay? So then all the grants are also assigned to study sections, and I explain the whole concept of study section in a minute. And once it's about 3 months after you send the grant, and they reviewed, and they meet in Bethesda, Maryland, they reviewed, and they get a written critique and a score. There is a person who is in charge of the study section. He's called SRO, the Scientific Review Officer. Anything to do with the critique and all this, you go either to the program director, but primarily to the SRO. And they are the ones going to tell you what was discussed there, why was the problem, and so on. They can tell you on the phone a lot of things that they won't put it in writing. And use this opportunity to get this information from them. So this is the first level, or the first phase of grants review. The summary statement and the scores go to council, and I explain what the council does. They are the ones that making the funding decisions. The study section members only review you on the scientific merit. They also discuss the budget. They can say you ask too much budget. On very few occasions they say you asked for too little budget. One time I didn't ask enough and they gave me more money than I asked. But that's very rare, okay? But the council are the one that decide how much money, where the money goes, and what the cutoff is. Here you can intervene as well because there are appeals. So every time I put in red things where you can intervene, what you can do to change things. If funding is approved and you are very lucky, then they write you a letter and they say that you've been granted, and now you can start some negotiations. For example, someone moved, someone joined you, there is a shift, because there is some time, almost a year between the time you submitted the grant by the time you got it, so you can negotiate about the budget and also the start time. So a lot of things are open to negotiation. It's not written in stone. Once you're lucky and you got the grant and you get it for 3 years, 5 years and all this, there is a requirement for a yearly report, and they insist on it. The Army is much worse than NIH. NIH, the yearly report is not so bad, but termination report is very important. And mind you, if you issue a patent at the time, there's a major problem there to negotiate with NIH about it. because NIH feel they funded you, the patent belongs to them, but you can negotiate this. So patent is an issue that you should mind about it. Okay, what are the study sections? Really, these are the ones that determine your fate. Would you get the grant or not? Because these are your peers, they are the scientists, they look at your grant and they say, is it good enough? Is it new enough? Are you justified for what you're doing? Do you have a good background and so on? I'll tell you that a little bit more. So what are the study sections? In a study section, there are anywhere from 20 to 30, 40 scientists. They are focused on particular research field and they charge to review the applications. The CSR, Scientific Review Officer, the SRO, is the one that manages each study section. He makes the initial contact with the scientists. The scientists come from all over the country. They're not scientists from NIH. They come and they have to have, like United States, they always have the balance. They have to have a race and a sex, gender balance, and age balance, and a region of the country balance. They have to be from the East, from the West, from the Midwest, and so on. So among the 20, about 30 scientists usually in the study section, you'll have few assistant professors, but mostly there'll be more seasoned investigators, and they selected by their knowledge of a certain field. They usually brought into for a trial. They sit there for, they meet 3 times a year at specific times. Over a service in a study section is about 4 years, so you get to know the people. And they become very kind of friends, so to speak. They sit there usually in NIH 2 to 3 days, and every time they meet, they review about approximately 100 grants. In a minute, I'll tell you how you do the review process. So the SRO collect all the grants that were sent to him from the different program directors, from the different institutes and all this. He gets about 100 or so, as I said. He makes a list of that, and he sends the list to the members. They have a chance to look at the abstracts, and they can mark in there, this is high priority for me, this is a medium priority for me. I know about this field, I'll take it. I know more or less, I may take it. I don't know anything about it, I won't take it. And they usually honor what you say. So they assign the grants to you. About 4 weeks before the meeting, they send you actually the grants that you're going to read, and every member gets in the neighborhood of about 12 to 15 grants to read. That's a lot of work. It used to take me about 2 to 3 days to go over a grant. I read it once just to get the information, then I read, if it's not exactly in my field, and most of it's not exactly in my field, I have to read a few papers around to understand what they're talking about, and that's after I already selected what I wanted to review. For example, I'll never take a thyroid. I don't know almost nothing about thyroid, so they won't give me a thyroid, but they'll give me things on the brain, on cancer, general cell biology, some genetics and things like that. So you read it and you write your critique, and a critique is several pages, 4 to 5 pages critique, so you spend a lot of time on that, and you have to give a preliminary score. I'll talk about the scoring in a minute. Okay, so this is now, how are the study sections divided? There are several types of grants in NIH, which I'll go over in a little bit. The R series and the K series are usually called investigator-initiated research application. The R01 is the major one for NIH. R03, R21 are the smaller ones. R15 is for conferences. Case awards that you are not eligible for because it's usually for training that's usually for Americans only. They are all done by chartered study sections. There are about 100 study sections or even more than that, and they have regular and temporary members. However, there are other types of study sections, special emphasis panels. For example, NIH decided we are going to study HIV, and we want just to have the whole thing about HIV or Zika or something else. They have a special grant for that. They assemble a special emphasis panel. Fellowship panels are separate completely. And the small business and the technology transfer, I don't believe that you are entitled to. So we won't talk about that. Any questions so far?
I think I didn't understand the difference between the study centers. So if they belong specifically to...
They don't belong to institute, they belong to NIH. A study section, and I'll show you the list. They are, let me continue and it'll be clear to you. So, the study section are grouped by what you call integrated review groups by content. And of the 25, there are all over 25. Within each IRG, which is the integrated review group, there are about 6 or 7 study sections. They take a subject and divide it to the smaller components of it. I'll show you an example and you'll understand. For example, biological chemistry, micromolecular biophysics. Within this category, there are about 4 or 5 study sections. They look at maybe genes, they look maybe at proteomics, maybe look at something like that. Okay. Biology development, they could look at development, could be, doesn't have to be mammals, could be development of a fruit fly and aging. Among that, there are study sections. Okay, so these are the integrated reviews. Cell biology, very large category. Depends what aspect of cell biology you're talking about. I emphasize endocrinology, metabolic nutrition, reproductive science because I was in it and I'm going to tell you a little bit from my experience with it. There are about 6 study sections within this category. You can see gene, genome, genetics, infectious diseases. You can see where your own research fit and this will go into this integrated review group.
And such a study section can work for different institutes?
Oh, they don't work for institute. They work for NIH.
Yeah,
they receive 100 grants from probably 4 or 5 institutes. For example, the endocrinology study section would not get much from Eye Institute, okay? But they can get from NIDDK, and they can get from NIEHS, and they can get from allergy, and so on. And indeed, when we meet for the study section, they group the grants because for each cluster of grants, the program directors come to sit with the study section, to be there and actually listen to what the scientists say. So all the grants that come from NCI are grouped together and review in one slot. Then come the grants from NIGMS and so on and so on. Understand? Okay. Immunology, for example, there are many aspects of immunology. There are 2 or 3 study sections that cover different aspects of. So you can imagine, I'll give you an example of the endocrinology metabolism. You see what's involved. The integrated review group, what are they reviewing? The molecular, cellular, higher order hormone-regulated process, physiology, pathophysiology. It's a very large category. These are the study sections. You can see that. So I was a member in the 1980s. I was a member of molecular cellular endocrinology. Study section is a very old one, and I became the chair of it for 2 years. I'll tell you a little bit about that too. You can see that, for example, our study section didn't review much clinical stuff because you have next to us, there's another study section that does the integrated clinical endocrinology and reproduction. Pregnancy, neonatology, special study section, and so on. You can see, because you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of grants, and they want the expert for each subject to be there in the study section so you can be reviewed by your peers. Okay? A few years later, I became a member in the 1990s. I became a member of the other ones that are labeled in red: endocrinology, metabolism, nutrition, reproductive sciences. But this was a fellowship grant. We dealt only with the K awards and all this. And I also became a chair of this one. So I'll tell you what the chair is not so fun things to be. I'll tell you why. Because you really have to be the good cop, bad cop over in the meeting. There's a lot of prima donnas sitting in there. There's a lot of famous scientists, and you have to, it's like herding cats. You cannot herd cats. You cannot herd scientists, okay? Your job as a chair is to keep the time and stop the people that like to talk a lot, and encourage the ones that don't like to talk a lot, and that's very ifying. Zamira? Okay. Okay, let's go about research grants. Okay, the R series are the really bread and butter of NIH. The R01 is the main type. Everybody wants to get the R01 because it's anyway from 3 to 5 years. There are normally no restriction on budget, but traditionally $250,000 direct cost per year. But I've gotten some more. If you can justify, and you can justify well, they'll give you up to $300,000, up to $400,000 a year, and that's a lot of money for direct cost because on top of it goes the indirect cost. Now comes the smaller ones, but they're very good because they, especially for starting, the R03 is a small grant at 2 years, $50,000 a year, not bad money. R13 is support for conferences. You are eligible for that. If you are, for example, right now in the Weizmann, I'm helping a fellow there that is organizing a Gordon Research Conference in Switzerland, and he's applying to NIH to the Gordon Conference and don't give you. I was also chair of a Gordon Conference, and I remember I applied both for NIH and NSF and got a lot of money because the Gordon Conferences don't give you enough money to bring all the scientists, so you need. And so you can apply for that. I don't know if you have a conference within the Israel, if you can apply to NIH, probably not, but for FASEB, or Gordon, or things like that, you could. So that's R13. R15, probably you're not eligible for that, because for undergraduates and graduate students, I don't think so. R21, yes. R21 is the one that is exploratory. They tell you don't need a lot of preliminary data. Use this opportunity. There is competition, but if you don't try, you don't get it, okay? It's not bad. It's $275,000 a year. It's just a shorter time. R24, I don't think you're eligible for resource-related research projects. It's usually for, big instruments or things like that, proteomics, all things like that. R25, I don't think you, clinical training, probably not. Business, I don't think you are eligible, the small business. It's really nice to get the business because the first year they give you a little bit of money, $150,000, but then you can go the second phase and third phase, you can get up to $1 million. They want to encourage you to move what you find into the business, and to make it something that the people will benefit from that. And I don't know, that is new for me, the R56, high priority short-term project. I'm not familiar with that. It pops out for me when I start looking at it. You may want to look at that if you're eligible. Then there is the K series, the Career Development Award. I don't believe that you're eligible for that. Fellowship, I know you're not, is the T and F, you're not. Program projects, these are wonderful grants. They used to give it a lot and they don't give it anymore. These are when you within the same institute, same university, or 2 or 3 universities around a certain subject, you have 3 or 4 PIs, and they have a program project. We used to get a lot of it. I don't think they give it a lot now. And I don't think you're eligible for research project cooperation year 1. These are center awards. They are the big money. Big money, they're hard to get. Takes many years to get one, and schools that get it hang to it with their dear life. Okay, any questions on that? So there are the R01, R03, R21, and I think that the R13 are probably open for you, and look at the other things that I wasn't sure about. The R56, I don't know about that. Okay, foreign applicants, obviously it's important. So, this is what NIH says, whether they adhere with that, and I'll tell you some bias and some things that happen in study sections. They review the same way, they say, but the following are stressed as a part of the review process. What you want to emphasize when you are a foreign applicant? Whether the project presents special opportunities for furthering research programs through the use of unusual talent. Use these words, the key words. Unusual talent that you have, that you can offer. It's hard to believe that you'll have unusual talent in all of the big United States that you cannot find. Try it. It may work. Resources, yeah, sometimes there are resources that are available. Population, definitely, if you deal with population, because in Israel there are specific populations that are not there, or environmental conditions. Emphasize all these things everywhere you can when you stick in there, especially when you talk about the impact of the proposal you write, that are not readily available in the United States or that augment existing US resources. So they're looking at that, okay? Use also these other keywords, whether the proposed project is specific relevance, so the mission, use the mission and objective of the institution and the center. You want to say, we are going to help you to further the US. They're very local patriots. They want to know that science is better in the United States. And you say, what we are doing going to help you too. And the potential for significantly advancing the health science in the United States. Okay? They're giving you money, but they want to get something in return. Okay, the grant review process. Now I'll tell you a little bit some anecdotes and so on, and you can stop me by questions. So I told you before the meeting, you select the grants for review. So, and at the meeting, order of review. I'll tell you a little bit. The very first time they invited me, I was already associate professor, but not famous, God knows what. And they invited me to NIH to try me out if I would fit. Someone must have recommended my name or whichever, if I would fit with the endocrinology study section. And they gave me 2 grants to review only. One was from Harvard, I remember, and one was from somewhere in Utah, whichever. I've never done it before. I didn't know how to do it. I was very nervous about it. I read the one from Harvard. It was something on timing in the brain, whichever. I thought it was fantastic grant. And I wrote a very glorious review. And the other one I thought was very mediocre, and I was a terrible review. So I'm coming to the study section, and usually they sit exactly like that. It's about 30, 40 scientists in there. I don't know anybody there. I'm coming, I'm with a foreign accent you can hear. I don't speak like American. And I'm a woman, and that was in the 80s. There weren't too many women in high positions there. And so everybody's sitting there introducing themselves, what their name, what they're doing, and so on. And they started the review process. Usually the review goes, the chair call in the first reviewer, what you score, he gives a score. Second reviewer, what you score, overall score, so you get an idea. First of all, you triage some. I'll tell you in a minute how do you do the triage. And then I say, okay, you tell your what your review is and how you evaluate it. And you sit at home and you don't want to read it, but you want to summarize it. And you say what you like about it, what you didn't like about it, what's the point. And you go step by step, what are the points in there. So I'm sitting the first day trying to absorb all this information. And I see the killing one grant after another, just like that. And I say, oh my gosh. And I like this grant. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should change my mind. And then comes the evening, and they call my name as the first reviewer. They shouldn't have done that. They should have let me hear what the first one is doing. And it's up to 5 minutes before I say, I'm going to change my mind. No, I liked it, I'm going to say it. And I'm a little bit shaky, because I see they are killing one grant after another, killing. I said this was a wonderful grant, and I gave it very high priority. Second reviewer stood up and said, ditto, I liked it too. And I said to myself, okay, I should trust my judgment. I shouldn't go by what I thought to please them or not to please them. I liked it, I would say it. And that was on like that. I didn't like the second one. The second reviewer didn't like the second one, and I passed the acid test. So I served on the study section for 3 years, and then they asked me to be the chair. So, and I have to tell you an anecdote about that. At the time, there weren't too many women in the study section, and let alone a woman chair. A chair is a tough business, as I say, because you have to sit in there, you have to make sure that you finish in time. And towards the end of the day or the second day, they're all anxious to go back home. And there are some that like to elaborate, and they start talking like forever and all this. There is no other way to stop them. So I remember the first time I was the chair, there was this fellow from Texas, Larry was his name, one with a 10-gallon hat and so on, big fellow and all this. He didn't like the idea that I was the chair, no way. I think he wanted to be the chair. So I'm starting the meeting and all this. It was his time to say, he stood up like that and he said, Madam Chairperson. And everybody laughed. Because chairperson, madam, it's uncommon. So I was kind of making face, didn't say anything. They said this thing, whichever, we went on. Second time come, few grants later, second time came, Madam Chairperson. He did it about 3 times during this meeting. I'm seizing because I thought it was inappropriate. Didn't say anything. I said, okay, I'll swallow it. 3 months later, we're meeting. The guy stand up again and say, Madam Chairperson. I said to myself, that's it. I said, Larry, you can call me Professor Ben Jonathan. You can call me Madam President. You can call me what you want. Stop this nonsense. I won't take it. The 3 women that were in there did like that. And that was it. He finished it. 2 years later, we continued. He never did it again. At the end, when I finished they threw a party when I finished to be a chair, and he came to me and said, Nira, you did a good job as a chair. It was really something. Okay. So this is a review. Primary, secondary, and tertiary reviewers give their scores. And they give a preliminary overall impact score. Nowadays, they all sit with computers. They do all the scoring on this. The scoring goes with the 9-point rating. 1 exceptional, and 9 is poor. What you want in order to get a grant nowadays, you have to be either 1 or 2, exceptional or excellent. Once you start to very good, and all this, forget it. You'll never get it. But for each category, you get a score. For significance, for investigators, for innovation, for approach, for environment. So they negotiate. What happened is They take about a half an hour or so per grant. It's a lot of time to talk about a grant, but mind you that at home you've been sitting for 3 days on it. You really know it. All the people in the study section have not read the grants. They read only their own grants. But at the time you're talking, the three talking to each other, the three reviewers, primary, secondary, and tertiary, they talk to each other and they try to convince the audience to go with them. Meanwhile, others go and they pick up something, they say, oh, this. They pick up, he knows this, he knows it. You try not to be personal in there. You don't say that you know the person, or you don't say no gossip, no anything like that. You talk about science. You try to do that. Okay. Then the chair has to summarize. That was one of the toughest things for me as a chair, because I had to go over this. Before the meeting, I had to read all the abstracts. So I had to be familiar with all this. It was a lot of work for me. And also there are a lot of fields I didn't know much about. And at the end of discussion, I had to summarize. And they have to all listen to what I summarize. And I have to summarize without being idiotic. So you try to stay on top of it. And then after the chair summarizes, they write on the board, or they write on the board what the three reviewers, the overall impact, and then there is a voting. But if there is a big difference between them, they try to get a consensus. Let's try horse trading. Well, if he does that, and if you do that, what do you think about that? Okay, I'll go up from 2.5 to 2, and you go down from 1.3 to something, and they try to get, but sometimes they don't. If there is a big difference between them, the minority has to write a separate report, and they try to avoid it. They don't like to do that. So usually after that, they try to get a consensus, but the overall impact, what you will get as a criteria when they send you, is the average of all the voting. And they usually, because they didn't read the grant, they will go by what the primary reviewers, primary, secondary reviewers recommend. So here you go with 1, 2, 3, or 4, no decimals. But the overall impact would be 2.2, 1.5, whichever. If you are below 1.8, you're pretty good. If you are above 2.5, forget it. Now the percentile, because when you get the critique, you get both the overall impact with the individual each. What you have to pay attention to when you get your critique is the significance, because it tells you whether your idea is resounding. Investigator is not as critical. Usually they give you good, unless you're extremely inexperienced, or you goofed, or you cheated, or whichever. And innovation is important, and most important is approach. Is your scientific approach sound? And this is usually what they spend most of the time, is on the approach. Environment, usually, if you're coming from a good institution, is no problem. All the grants from this study section go now on a scale of the last 3 meetings, of the last 2 or 3 meetings of the study section, and by this, they give you the percentile. And percentile is really even more important than the overall impact, because they try to equalize. There are sometimes the study section was getting very easy grants. They gave a lot of good scores, and sometimes they harder, and so on. So you'll get the two points. And then this information is conveyed to you in the terms of the critique with the scores. Okay, no one talk, you cannot mention funding in the study section. You're not allowed to mention funding. After you talk about the science, comes the budget. Only they talk about the budget. You requested the budget. Are you justified? Is it a duplication? Do you need this extra postdoc that you asked for? Do you need this instrument? Do you need this and this and this? They can cut you, and they can recommend less money than what you asked for, okay? But they don't tell you if you get the money or not. They can just tell you what you asked for is appropriate or not, as is or cut. few times more. I've given few times more money because I thought they cannot do the research by what they're going to get the money for. Funding level, that is something the NIH doesn't, it's a word of mouth. We know this institute, a funding level this year is 5%, and this institute, this you have to call your friends and to get from whoever knows that what the best institutes to for example, GM usually traditionally fund much better priority. NCI is terrible. NIHS, environmental health is not bad. NIDDK is not bad. So we know it, the people who are there, but you wouldn't know that. Advisory council. Now, all these grants now go to council. The council belongs to the institute. You asked before about study sections. Study sections don't. But council are the one that's making the funding decision for the institute, because each institute has its own budget. They have to fit it within the budget and the mission. Okay? So they do the second level of review. And the review is very superficial, but it's very important. What do? Who are the council? They are scientists from all over the country, also from business and pharmaceuticals, and sometimes even some donors or whichever. The people who have an interest in the medical establishment and public representatives. They are chosen by either institution or the center, and they're approved by the overall Department of Health and Human Services. Some of them are appointed directly by the President of the US. They take it so seriously, because that's very important. So I've never been in a council, but I know I talk to people. I was in advisory to council. I was in membership of advisory to council when they decide the research priorities. So I learned how a council works. The staff, the different program officers come in there, and they present to the council the overall impact score for this particular grant, the percentile ranking, the summary statement. And then council members have an access to application. They don't read them. Maybe they read the summary statement. Then they really listen to the program officers. And this is where, if you develop good relationship with your program officer, up to this point you can appeal and he can work for you if he liked the grant. Sometimes the program officer liked the grant and the study section didn't, or the other way around. You have to really talk to your program officer in order to advance your grant. They do the funding level. They know how much money they have for this year. They have to divide it 3 times to the 3 meetings that they have, and they make the funding decisions. Actually, the one that makes the final decision is the institute director, and he decides. There is a point of appeal up to this point. You can appeal if you feel that you've been wronged, if you wasn't judged rightly, and so on. But you cannot overdo that because it's a complicated process. Okay, so far on NIH, I have only 1 or 2 slides on the DOD, the CDMRP. Any questions here? Because we'll move from that.
Possible. You know the mechanisms of PA, program announcement,
Okay.
and RFA.
A request for application.
Yes, which is much more
Very similar.
focused.
Yeah.
And
This comes all the time, and they are very good. I follow it every week. I get a thing from the university, and I see if there is anything that comes up. Usually,
it has better chances.
no, not necessarily, but if it is a particular one, they tell you if it goes to a regular study section, or the regular application time, or they convene a special study section on a particular subject, and then you probably have a better chance because they put an allotment of money just for this one, and they want to promote this particular field. But by all means, use every opportunity. But they usually have a different deadlines, different, there are special emphasis panels, and they don't go to but in the program announcement, they will tell you all the details. So you have to read all the details. And I must tell you, when you write the grant, spend most of the time on the specific aims. As a reviewer, I look at the specific aims, and I can tell you, almost without ever making a mistake, whether the grant is good or not by the specific aims. And another thing is, don't go overboard with the technical details. Don't describe forever how you do Western blotting. Everybody knows how to do Western blot, okay? Or all the trivial. Describe only things that are unique to you. A lot of people use as fillers, and I use 2 nanomolar of this plus 3 nanomolars of that, and heat it to 35 degrees and wait 50 minutes and then put it in cool and then do that and then forget it. That is not what the grant is all about. What you want to emphasize, you have a good idea, you know how to do it, you have preliminary data, you think that the field will advance because of what you're doing, you think that it'll open more questions that you can solve, things like that, emphasize that. Write a good specific aim and be very, in the specific aims, use no more than about, usually you have a little bit of, in the specific aim page, you have a little bit of introduction, introduce what is the issue, what is the questions you're asking, what are you suggesting to do, and then specific aims. And I will do so and so and so, A, B, C, D, brief. So it'll know that you are with your feet in the ground, you know what you're doing, you are doing directly into it, and you don't bother them with all kind of nonsense that they know. But another thing is, don't ever think that the one that read your grant is the expert in your field. In fact, that could be a problem. I noticed that when I'm reviewing grant that is in my field, let's say my field is prolactin or breast cancer or something like that, I tend to pay more attention to little details that other people want because I know the field and I'm becoming harsher on them. However, the reviewers divide into 2 types. The ones that like to promote the field, and they are the nice ones, and they say, if I kill the field, I will be dead at the end with it. Okay, and some people are doing it. And the other ones are ones that are afraid of competition. And they know, this person is my competitor, I won't say it, but I'm going to turn him down because that'll leave me more space to do my stuff. And that's very bad, okay? And we're all people, and in the study section you can see that the people are protecting their field, or protecting their own, or protecting the field. And I like the ones that protect the field. Because I feel if I'm killing my competitors, and always you have competitors, I will eventually kill the field, and that's what happens. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
With regard to the fields, do they really work? Does it make any change if I go in and say, no, I think this is not okay, or this is not proper?
From my experience, yes. About 3 or 4 years ago, I applied to a big UO1. And I didn't get a very good score. And I had a very good relationship with the program officer. I called him, we discussed it, he worked for me, and he moved me against and I got the grant, big money, 5 years, about $1 million. Believe me, I was quite away from the funding level. And I convinced him, yes, you can do it by phone. It's a bit more difficult from here, but you can do it also. Yes, work with the SRO. SRO is the one can tell you what was the things that are not in the written, but what was said in the, if he is a good person, and usually the public service, they will tell you. But the program officer is the one that can work for you. If you convince him that you've been wrong or something like that, yes, and what can you lose? What can you lose it? You won't succeed. And the chances are, yes.
There are some people that are like serial complainers. That
He doesn't know that. You complain to the same person for 10 years? He doesn't know that you're serial complainer. If you are a serial complainer, I hope that you complain to different people. Okay? Right. No, seriously. I remember once I got a 32 percentile. Forget about it. I talked and talked them in, and they gave me the money on 32 percentile. Now they're funding you at 10 percentile. So, yes, it's not chutzpah. It's really believing in yourself. As I say, you see an opportunity in every difficulty. Use this. Churchill said it, and I believe that Churchill says something right. Okay, a little bit about CD. How are we doing on part-time? We okay? You want to hear about this? Okay. It's a very interesting enterprise. It only started in 1974. And they mostly funding specific diseases or conditions. I gave some examples: breast cancer, prostate cancer, autism, PTSD, it's a post-traumatic stress disorder, Gulf War illness, etc. It started in 1975, and it's very interesting history to date. Women with breast cancer felt have a lobby, a big lobby, and they felt that they are not giving enough money for breast cancer, and women are dying. They went to Congress and did like that, we want more money. Congress was at the time in trouble because of funding and all this. They didn't want to give them from the congressman. They said, let's go to the military. They have a lot of money. They'll give you the money. They forced the military to put about $200 million just for breast cancer. 1 year was the first. And from there on, they established the CDMRP, started with breast cancer. Breast cancer was the only one for about 3 or 4 years. Then men say, hey, what about us? Prostate cancer, bingo. Women say ovarian cancer, bingo. Then they say autism, as if you have soldiers with autism, and so on and so forth. And now there's a whole, they now get a Congress. Every year Congress gives them the money. It's separate from NIH, but it's all started from women with breast cancer. I was very lucky at the time. I was working on breast cancer. 1974, when the army came, I said, army? Why would I go to the army with breast cancer? The males, what do they have in soldiers with breast cancer? But money is money, so I applied and I got the money. Since then, I got a lot of money from the DOD. On autism also I got money, and on breast cancer and so on. And since then, I was also involved in the review process, the meeting very similar to NIH. I'll tell you a little bit about that too. So since they are not an item like NIH, every year the lobbies go in there and ask Congress for money, and they open it up. 1 year is like that, 1 year is like that, but there's a lot of programs now are funded by the Army, okay? So this was 1993. That's what I just told you, $250 million. Now, Army is an army, and let me tell you, you cannot change a thing. They send you very, very elaborate instructions how to do it. Don't ever dare to change the font, to change the margins, or to change anything. They want this, you do it exactly. You use the wrong font, they disregard your grant. You use the wrong time, disregard. You don't have all the components, disregard. They say 10 pages, you do 10 and a half pages, forget it. Army, exactly by the rules. Not NIH is a little bit more flexible. So very strict to rules. The Army proposals are much more complex. There are many, many, many components. I've done it many, many times. For me, it's easy, but the one who starts with that, by all means, they need a lot of help. You have impact, you have innovation, you have statement of work, you have all kinds of things like that, in addition to the proposal itself. And then you have an abstract, and lay abstract, and scientific abstract, and this, and this, and this, and this. Statement of work is something you pay attention to, because they'll hold you to it. In the statement of work, you say over unlimited pages. You say every year, and every quarter of the year, exactly what you're going to do. And by golly, don't do it as they say, because once you get the grant and you didn't do exactly as you said you were going to do, they hold you responsible. Why didn't you do that? I tell them, you have 4 years before you say you're going to do that. Things didn't work out. You changed rules. You changed direction. You changed. No, you wrote that you're going to do. You're going to purify this, and you didn't. Say I couldn't purify. You say you're going to do that. You should have done it, just like that. And this is when you write the progress.
Contact them and tell them that you're shifting because of whatever?
Every year you tell them that you're shifting, but the idiots that sit there and review it, they don't care. They go by the statement of work. So now when I write an Army proposal, I do a very, very thin, very undetailed, but don't tell you how much detail. I always thought it's good for them. I'll give them all the details. I'll give them as little details and as little timing as possible and get by with it.
But then they tell you didn't detail enough.
They don't. If they gave me the money, they cannot say it. It's my business, right?
Sorry, Mira, regarding the detail aspect here, what is the minimal amount of detail you would recommend so that they don't say, well, wait, we're not going to give you the grant because we don't know what you're going to do?
A page and look like you're doing a lot in there and just camouflage it. I'm telling you, I've gotten quite a few grants from the Army, and I learned from my experience that I got the money, but then when I have to write the report, they hold you. The progress report of the Army is awful. They review it. They review the report, and if they don't like it, you have to write it again, as if you're writing a paper on the report.
We have some experience with
Do you? So you share with
that.
me?
A little bit, but too much.
Yeah.
But CEMRP in general is a little bit more generous in terms of their funding levels.
No. The opposite.
That's actually, I'm the one that actually manages the budgets for all of the U.S. grants, and I have a CDMRP budget that is $1,500,000, and that's over, originally it was 3 years. So that's
Well,
more
I didn't-
funding level than NIH.
No, yeah, okay. I didn't go into, I thought that I'm going to discuss primarily NIH, so I didn't go into CDMP. But they have, depend upon if you're level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is $300,000, level 2 is up to $500,000. It depends upon if you co-principal investigators or not. Yeah, it depends. Level 3 is a lot of money. But level 3 is usually also clinical. Are you dealing with clinical trials?
There are no, he's not doing
Have anybody from the anybody from the Technion ever got a level 3 from the Army? I doubt it.
I don't know what you mean level 3, but it was a big grant with many participants.
That's true, there were 4 sub-awareness centers.
Level 3 is the sky is the limit almost. It's huge. It's usually clinical trials.
Levels are in the, as you said, for clinical research.
Right,
But,
right.
They have many
Maybe,
programs and sub-programs that
Okay, as it's probably level 2, and it's a good. Level 2 is about the same category as the R1. It's about the same. They have innovation. I didn't go. I didn't go into details of the military. One interesting thing. Was a surprise to us. The first time I went to a Army, I call it the Army, no CDMP. I went to the Army, first of all, the first time we meet, all the big brass, all the generals coming there from the CDMRP, and they give you a talk about the mission and blah, 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 you know, stuff like that. And then when we separate to study section, a very similar study section, like cancer therapeutics, so and so and so, you have 3 people in there that sitting that have the specific disease. For example, they call them consumers. Yeah. And they are, so we were sitting there with, that was mostly on breast cancer, and they were sitting there, 2 women and a man. And he's a man with breast cancer. It was very interesting because 1% of all breast cancer is for men, and they usually have the worst case because they discover it much late and they're usually more aggressive. So they're sitting in there, they're reading the grants, they're not scientists.
But they write also.
They write. the scientists usually don't consider what they listen to them, and it's usually, a lot of them are very intelligent people and they have a lot to say, but they cannot, they like the grant or no, don't like the grant and so and so. But their voice is not effective in the final score. But I think it's a good thing. I think that NIH should institute something like that, but it'll be much more difficult for NIH because the Army has it for specific disease, and the NIH doesn't have a specific disease for the study section.
Do they prefer, like, or do they put some emphasis on grants related to army studies?
Okay, yeah, they do have, of course, the Gulf War, PTSD, psychological things, more diseases associated with the army, probably some
Many of the
toxic things.
In many of the programs they have, they ask you to refer, try to refer to soldiers or to veterans.
No, veterans is a different story. The VA is a different story. VA has their own funding mechanism.
But they ask you to show how it relates to veterans.
They show you nobody does that. Okay. The truth is nobody does that. Okay. You write like an NIH grant, but NIH fund much more basic science. That's a mission, except for the clinical studies. And the Army, they want much more disease-related. So it's not so much basic. If you want just to study cell biology for the sake of cell biology, they won't fund you. But if you say cell biology because it's related to prostate cancer, yes. But nowadays they have, I think, about 20% of the US Army is women. So it's relevant to them. But why they ever fund autism, I don't know. I got money for autism, not because I do studies on autism, but I do studies on metabolism, and they give them antipsychotic drugs and they gain weight. So I talked about obesity in autism. I got the money.
רציתי להרגיע מעט את החששות שב-CDMRP השלב הראשון זה תמיד הצעה פרלימינרית של עמוד או שניים. אחר כך מגיעות הצעות, אבל לפחות בהתחלה הם רוצים להתקדם.
הם לא עושים ריוויו של זה, זה רק בשביל להיכנס הם לא עושים ריוויו. זה רק בשביל להכניס...
אני חושבת שיש תוכניות שונות.
הם רוצים להכניס את זה רק לקומפיוטר, הם רוצים לדעת את מי הם צריכים, אין להם study section, standing study section, הם רוצים לדעת מי יבוא עם מה.
אבל הפעם אני חושב שהיה בעבר, כמו שאת אומרת, פשוט יש לנו דחיות רבות בשלב הפרלימינרי.
בחייך.
לא בגלל מספר, לא בגלל...
אלא?
אפילו, אני לא זוכר אם הם נותנים ריוויו או לא.
עכשיו אני פניתי לארמי ולא ידעתי ש...
יש תוכניות שזה רק a letter of intent, ויש תוכניות שזה משתנה בין תוכניות.
זה אני לא יודעת. לא יודעת, באמת. לא, אני לא יודעת. אני כל שנה עושה פעם או פעמיים לארמי. לא תמיד בהצלחה, אבל... לא, הם רוצים לדעת, NIH יש להם standing study sections, לארמי אין. אז הם רוצים לדעת מה הם צריכים לחכות, כמה יש תרפיוטיס, כמה יש זה, ואז הם עושים את הריקרוטמנט של הממברס. אבל באמת, תנסו, אם לא מנסים, לא מקבלים. כן.
Do these grants, because we are paying from Israel, involves like having a US partner or?
Wonderful if you have a US partner. It really will remove the foreign component. It won't be so effective. Listen, there is bias. If you are reviewed by a Jewish person in there, he'll have some sentimental something to an Israeli applying. If you are reviewed by someone who doesn't like Israelis, they'll show it. It'll be overt, but they won't show it.
Is it true for NIH and CDMRP as well?
People are people, sure.
Yeah, okay.
You know, how do you call it, BDNF or something?
BDS.
Okay, BDS, yeah. It comes to everything.
And I wanted to ask something else. You said that NIH is more basic science. I know that relevant to when you relate it to CDMRP, but how do you relate NIH and NSF?
אוקיי.
We are not eligible to NSF at the moment.
Yeah, I know. And most people in medical schools like I was usually don't get, I got once or twice from NSF. But normally I don't, the NSF is for non-medical. אבל בתוך ה-NIH את יכולה בייסיק ולא בייסיק וקליניקל ופתולוג'יקל וכולי. זה כזה אורגניזיישן ענקי שאפשר לזה, אבל הצבא לא רוצה בייסיק סיינס, לא רוצה. אבל זה מאורגן יפה מאוד שם אצלהם, יוצא מן הכלל. רק זה דופק כמו הצבא. מין שמאל, ימין שמאל, ימין שמאל, צריכים ללכת לפי הקצב שלהם. לא, that's it. אם אתם רוצים עזרה ממני, את האימייל שלי יש לך.